right, everybody. Well, welcome back to another home buyer webinar. Really excited to have one of my best buddies and also one of the best lenders in the entire country with me today, Benjamin Adams. Hey, Ben.
Adam, thank you so much for having me again. So excited to be here and can't wait to go over all of this exciting information. So thank you.
Yeah, me too. We'll see if anybody else kind of joins here over the next minute or two. But just want to respect everybody's time and start right at 5 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. Looks like we have a few people in today from out of state. It looks like John from out in California. I'm not sure where. I think that's Estella. I can't see what her name. Anyways, yeah, we got a few different people in today. Excited to have you guys here with us. But let's go ahead and just jump right into it. And again, if you guys have any questions while having us present all of this material to you tonight, we're going to be going through this quickly, from a high level, kind of like a fire hose. So there's a good chance that there's going to be a few things that we're going to cover that you might want a little bit more info on. So if that's the case, feel free to just leave a note in the chat for us, and we can definitely address that at the end of the webinar tonight. So we're going to go ahead and throw the All right. Ben, can you hear me still? Okay. All right, you guys. So we're going to go ahead and get started here. So really excited again to have you here on another home buyer webinar. We'd like to call it a masterclass because we're really going to focus on some higher level, real actionable steps you guys can take regardless of where you are right now in the home buyer journey. If you're just thinking about buying a home, or maybe you've already bought and sold a few and you're just here for a refresher, or maybe to learn a little bit more about the Denver market and what's going on today. So regardless, we're happy you're here. But we really want to just kind of talk through a few things. First off, again, how Denver's just still a top market. There's a lot less people moving here. However, there's still a very high level of competition when it comes to both buyers and sellers. Definitely a rise in inventory, but it's still a bit lower than what we're used to. So between that and just the rising prices, definitely a few challenges that we're going to help you guys get through tonight. Hopefully you're here just because you want some strategies to buy smart, save money, and hopefully secure that dream home. And then we're going to go through just some proven tips to navigate and win, not just anywhere in the country, but specifically here in the Mile High City, Denver, Colorado. And then again, just like I said earlier, stay around till the end because I've got some awesome free resources that we're going to be sharing just for the people that are joining us tonight. So there's a few different reasons why I'm guessing you guys might be having some struggles and challenges when it comes to buying homes. And these are the four that we're seeing the most often. So just to kind of run through these really quick, a big one, saving for a down payment. A lot of buyers are struggling with the high down payment requirements since Denver is a competitive market. Excited to have Ben share, though, how it might not be as much as you think that you need for the down payment. Also, a lot of people just have a hard time understanding the market, just navigating some of the differences with prices, mortgage rates, and just the challenges with inventory throughout the year. Some people are challenged just with the writing of offers and how that part of this buyer process works. So we're going to talk through some really good ways to stand out among other competitors, especially if it's a multiple offer scenario. And then the last one, which is my favorite, is just finding the perfect home. A lot of people I noticed, again, since somebody I saw is in from California on the call tonight, if you're out of state, it's a little bit challenging just to really understand, what are the best parts of Denver, specific for what you're looking for, but also just understanding, what are kind of the best places when it comes to walkability, budget, location, just a lot of different things that make Denver unique. And that's a big one for a lot of people, is just learning a little bit more about Denver if you're not from here. So not going to brag about myself, but just wanted to, put a couple things up here just to give a little bit of social credit or social proof for why you're hopefully on the call listening to me. 40 plus year Colorado and Denver native. This past year, in 2024, I was ranked 5th out of almost 350 agents here in Denver for eXp Realty. I was in the top 10% of Colorado agents, had about $8 million in sales last year. Also have a few certifications in real estate negotiation and also offering cash offers, express offers. And then Ben and I actually host together the Pursuit of Progress podcast. If you guys haven't checked that out, hopefully you guys will after learning about it tonight. And also I'm a host of a Living in Denver YouTube channel where I've got coming up on about 130 videos. Just a ton of great content there just to learn more about the different parts and neighborhoods of Denver and hopefully help you guys out there. Before we move on, though, I'd love just to have Ben just give a little bit of a background on himself. And before he does that, I'll just brag about him for a minute. Ben's been in the industry for a long time. I think he's been doing specifically what he's doing right now with North Point for, I think about, what is it, 10 years now?
9
right
years.
around there. Yep.
Yeah,
9 years. Yep. He's frequently won what's known as the Scotsman Guide Award, which is for the top loan originators in the entire country. Just overall, just a really, really just very well-versed, a lot of different tools on his tool belt when it comes to different types of buyers, especially first-time home buyers, and is being really strategic about making it work no matter the circumstance. So in addition to that, Ben, share a few more things about just kind of your background and also just the mortgage industry.
Yeah, I love mortgage. I've been in mortgage my entire career. I went to high school, graduated from college, knowing that I wanted to get into the industry. So I've spent my entire career in the industry, done really every role that you can do. I've worked in the lock department. I've processed, worked in the closing department. I underwrote for a very long time. That's a really highly competitive skill because I can underwrite all of my own loans. I have that skill. But where my vision really lies and why I'm so passionate about this is I really want to help people and home buyers make informed decisions when it comes to their finances, their real estate strategies, and then their mortgage planning. And the reason for that is because there's such little education out there. And I can't tell you how many times I see, customer after customer making the same mistake again and again, or not understanding something. And so I want to be here as a resource. I want to help. And that really is where my passion and my focus is.
Love that. That's great, man. Well, thanks for helping all of us tonight. And you guys, I'll share all of his info at the end of the webinar as well. So if you have more specific questions that we can't answer together on our Q&A at the end of tonight's call, definitely have his info available for you guys to reach out for a one-on-one if you have specific questions. So, Denver buyers, they obviously need a proven strategy now more than ever. When you think about what a buyer is and who the buyers are that really do succeed, a traditional buyer, they react to market trends. They usually are paying full list price, missing out on a lot of key opportunities. A strategic buyer, hopefully what you guys will be like after tonight, they're proactively researching neighborhoods, they're negotiating smartly, and there's definitely a lot of different ways that hopefully they can find additional hidden savings. As far as some of the pitfalls we're going to help you guys avoid, definitely overpaying, missing deadlines, just talking through the whole contract to close phase of buying a home, and then also just inadequate inspection results is a really big one that is a kind of a passion of mine to talk about. And then the results, hopefully, from doing all that is Denver buyers using this proven strategy are going to save a significant amount of money and hopefully just get a lot better terms that really fit with what you're trying to accomplish when buying a home. Understanding today's local market, we're going to talk through a little bit of this over the next few slides, and we'd love to have Ben kind of lead part of this section of the presentation just because he's so involved in it on a day-to-day basis, especially with the mortgage and interest rates. But inventory is definitely continuing to grow. This is the busiest time of year in the market right now. Spring going into summer, just a lot of activity right now. Checking at the interest rates this morning is about 6.92%. So I'll have Ben share a little bit more about what he feels, what's going on there. And Denver, though, is definitely still a very competitive market. There are more homes, like I said, being listed every single week. There's a little bit more strategy needed right now, I think, just with the higher interest rates and I think some people are a little bit more strapped for affordability. So there's just some things we'll talk through on that. And then also just the local market conditions here in Denver that I think are really important to understand, especially if you are an out-of-state buyer, because every market is definitely unique and has its own set of challenges and hopefully techniques that we can share with you to hopefully win. All right, Ben, before I kind of go through some of these that I put together today, is there anything you want to maybe share first when it comes to where you see the market today, maybe where you see it going over the next couple weeks in May and into the summer months?
Yeah, those are questions that I get a lot. And my short-term prediction is that I think that we're going to see a lot more of what we have seen already in 2025 and really 2023 and 2024. We are going to see some volatility. We're going to see some ups and some downs. I'm not anticipating that rates are going to come down substantially, but we have gotten some good news this week. Consumer confidence is up a little bit. There was a trade agreement reached between the United States and China. The stock market reacted very favorably to that. Next, that was part one of three. The next big bullet point there is the budget. What is that going to look like? So there are some to get excited about. With the tariff stuff, that agreement with China, it's going to allow for possibly lower interest rates. And inflation concerns are going to close the door just a little bit for the Fed to possibly open or reduce the Fed funds rate sometime here over the next 2 or 3 months. Now, having said that, should you wait, or if you're someone that's in the market right now, do you wait for that to happen, or should you continue to move forward? And I'm of the belief that where are you at right now? You focus on the things that you can control. You can't control the market, you can't control interest rates, but you can make an informed decision. You can do your research and also look at it from an affordability perspective. So many borrowers get hung up on the interest rate, but they're not asking themselves, what does this look like for my monthly budgeting, my monthly cash flow? What does the payment look like? And so that's where I always encourage folks to make sure that they're really analyzing and wanting to identify that payment is in line with their short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. So I think we will have a little more volatility in the short term. Long-term, I'm very bullish, especially over the next 5 to 10 years.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Yep. And I agree with Ben 100% on all of that. So I think that was very well said. As far as here in the Mile High City in Denver, so every week I have a few different people in the industry that I look up to and really respect their insights. And one of them puts together a weekly market recap, and that's DMAR, which it stands for the Denver Metro Association of Realtors. So it's one of the largest realtor organizations here in Colorado. And they definitely, have some very, very intelligent people that help put together not only actual data to use, but also just their insights from, decades of experience. So this is kind of coming from mostly what they report every week, and then also adding in a bit of personal opinion as well. So the inventory and market demands. So this is for this past week. So I actually really did this for about the past 14 days, but tried to cater it a little bit more just to even be more relevant for the past week. So the market, though, definitely stayed busy these past few weeks. We had a lot of holidays and just stuff going on. Cinco de Mayo, the Kentucky Derby, Mother's Day. We also had some pretty substantial bad weather about a week and a half ago, which was over the weekend as well. So I think that affected some of the showings that weekend. But definitely lots of new homes are still hitting the market. The thing is, though, they're not as many are selling right away. It's taking a little bit longer. We look at a statistic or a metric for that known as days on market, or DOM, and that's still hovering a bit longer than we'd like to see. When it comes to inventory, the number of homes that are currently for sale, that is still growing, and it's definitely much higher than exactly this week last year. So that's great to see. And then showings did dip a little bit this past week, but again, there is some reasoning behind that when it comes to some of these holidays and also that weather that I had mentioned. Definitely, though, still also stronger than last year, which is a big pro, a big positive. Now, when it comes to buyer activity and demand, buyer activity did slow down a little bit with Mother's Day, a lot of school stuff going on with graduations, and also probably will be the same way this next weekend. So not like in a couple days, but the following weekend when we have Memorial Day weekend. So if you are a buyer, definitely late May can be a great time to negotiate a better deal. And also, most homes that do sell quickly are going under contract within the first 2 weekends. It's taking longer, however, for many homes to sell just because buyers do now have a few more choices. So buyers aren't needing to be quite as picky. They have a little bit more flexibility, which is good if I'm assuming most of the people on the call tonight are buyers. And a couple more metrics to share with you. So time on market, that's also known as that DOM, days on market, that I mentioned, and just the speed of selling. Homes are sitting on the market longer right now because there are more choices, as I just said. But the thing is, though, there's still just not as many that are ready to make the quick offers. So I think the biggest thing here is if you are a buyer, just understanding that you do have the upper hand in a lot of cases, just to either get a little bit better price point on the home, maybe negotiate some additional seller concessions. So just ways to make it an even more valuable and good deal for you. The chances of selling a home within 30 days did drop again last week, but good homes that are priced right are definitely still finding buyers. When it comes to pricing strategies, seller adjustments, Right now, it's about 1 out of 3 homes that go under contract had to lower their price before going under contract. That could be a couple things. It could be just being incorrectly priced from the get-go. So from day one, their listing agent, the realtor helping them sell the home, maybe, pushed it a little bit higher than they should have. Or it could also just be because, just the market that we're in right now. So just something that's good to be aware of. And these price cuts are usually small. That's showing that sellers are becoming a little bit more realistic. I think the more important thing here is just realizing that even if the price point on the home hasn't dropped yet, you still might have some opportunity to even just write an offer at a little bit lower than what the listing price is. Ben, is there anything on those 2 slides that maybe you'd like to add?
Yeah, what I'd like to add is if you are a buyer right now, it's very, very exciting because this is the strongest buyer's market we've had in a very long time. I always share this story. Back in 2021, I was co-hosting an open house. I got to the open house about 15 minutes before it started, and there was literally a line of 50 to 70 people out front waiting to go into this open house. Interest rates were at historic lows. There wasn't a lot of inventory at the time. So it was a crazy seller's market. Now that's flipped a little bit, to reference some of the data that you just pointed out, 1/3 of sellers are now having to reduce their sales price. There are more seller concessions and seller credits. And so if you are a buyer right now, it means that you have more options, there's more inventory, and you have more negotiating and more leverage as a buyer. That's why working with a really competent real estate agent that is an expert in negotiation, like Adam, is so important, because you want to make sure that you're maximizing this purchase every way that you can. There's a chance that you could be in this home for the next several years or the next several decades. So getting this purchase structured in a way that's going to give you the biggest platform and create the strongest foundation is just so critical.
Love that. Yeah, I think that was very well said. So guys, we'll now just kind of jump into how to prepare to buy a home this year. So we'd like to spend a little bit of tonight just going through, if you are maybe more on the kind of the introductory phase of learning about home ownership and how to buy a home, we'll just kind of quickly go through just the process. We're going to talk through 5 specific kind of really important phases or parts of this journey that you'll go on when buying a home. And then with each of these, share some really just kind of above what you're maybe typically used to reading or seeing on other real estate blogs and that kind of stuff. Just stuff that is really things that you can really help you get a better price on the home and just really succeed better. So we'll just kind of jump right into it by first having Ben just quickly go through the buyer roadmap. Now, obviously, there's a lot on here, and we'll go through a lot of this in a little bit more detail here in a second. But just to give you a visual of what it's going to take from day one until you're at the closing table getting your keys.
Yeah, and this is just a quick recap here of the buyer's roadmap. First you want to get connected with the real estate agent. From there, you want to make sure that you're getting pre-approved for a mortgage. That's so critical, and there are so many buyers that skip that step. They wait till the last minute to get pre-approved, or they wait till they're out looking at homes with their agent to kind of start that process. You want to get that done up front. Number 3, start your home search. Number 4, that's when you start making offers. We're going to move on to number 5, negotiating the contract. So again, you want to make sure that you're working with a real estate agent that is an expert negotiator. Right now is the time. And keep in mind that 80% of real estate agents last year did not have a single closing. We all know real estate agents. You probably have a family member that's a real estate agent. But do you want to work with someone that hasn't closed a transaction or hasn't done any deals? Or do you want to work with a local market expert in your area? And so that is always my suggestion. And you want to make sure you want to work with someone that has their pulse on the market. They know what the opportunities are, how you can take advantage of it. Number 6, once you go under contract, at that point, you're going to be in escrow. You're going to deposit your earnest money. Number 7, final details. So this will be just before closing. You're going to be working with your lender, putting the final touches on the loan, sending in your final documents. Those final loan documents and real estate documents are going to be prepared, the closing disclosure, the settlement statement. And then number 8 is the exciting time and one of the most exciting days of your life, which is the day of closing, especially if you're a first-time home buyer.
Yep, very exciting day. So So the 5 that we're going to dive deeper into tonight is getting pre-approved, which will be a big part for Ben to talk through. Finding that perfect home, that's something that I'll share a little bit more in depth on. Then also crafting that winning offer that'll set you apart from others, navigating these contracts, dates, and deadlines, and then at the final stage, closing and that final walkthrough. So right off the bat with number 1, getting pre-approved for a mortgage. So again, this is the rate that we had today. Ben, just share a little bit about, this pre-approval process and just really what it takes to be as prepared as possible.
Yeah, thank you, Adam, for asking that. It's such an important piece. Now, it's a 2-step process. The first step is going to be completing the online application and then getting a credit pull done. Now, most lenders will have the option of doing a hard inquiry. Some lenders will also have the option of doing a soft inquiry as well. I always recommend the hard inquiry. Just because that's a little bit more official. We can see the full report. But if you're someone that you think you're 6 months, 9 months, a year out, you may want to consider the soft inquiry. The soft inquiry doesn't count as a formal inquiry on your credit. So just make sure that your timing is lined up and have that conversation with your lender. So part 1 is filling out the application and pulling credit. Part 2 is submitting all of your documents to your lender. So all of your financial documents, your bank statements for the last 2 months. That would include anything like checking, savings accounts, retirement accounts, your pay stubs from your job if you're a W-2 employee. You want to send those in. Your W-2s if you're self-employed, your tax returns, a copy of your driver's license, and everything else. And what that is going to do is it's going to give your lender an opportunity to go through all of your financials, reconcile that with the information that's on credit in tandem with the credit score and then all of your debts. And they're going to be able to verify what your options are. Not only your purchasing power, meaning how high can you purchase, but then they will also let you know what loan programs you're available or eligible for. So if you're a first-time home buyer, for example, you may be eligible for some down payment assistance. You may be eligible for a favorable interest rate. Sometimes there can be some income restrictions on some of these programs. And so that's where you want to, that's why it's so important. Number 1, to get formally pre-approved, because when you are out working with your agent and submitting offers, you're going to have to document that pre-approval letter. So when you do that, that tells the seller that you've already gone through all of these steps. But more importantly, in my opinion, you want to know what your options are so you can make the best decision and make an informed financial decision. And there's still a lot of misconceptions out there, like you were talking earlier, Adam, about down payment. A lot of people still believe that you need to put 20% down. I know Dave Ramsey is a big advocate for that, but there's minimum down, there's reduced down payment, and then there's zero down. At North Point, for example, we offer all 3 types. We do minimum down FHA, which is 3.5%, minimum down conventional, which is 5%. We do reduced down payment. A reduced down payment is usually for first-time home buyers or folks that are under a certain income. On a conventional loan, though, you can do 3%. And then we also do down payment assistance as well, where we have partners over at the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority that we've partnered with, where we do down payment assistance, and they will offer both grants and silent second mortgages. And so again, you just want to make sure that you know what your options are so you can make a decision that aligns with your goals and your vision, not just for the home, but for the mortgage.
Yep. I'm going to share a story, but I'll wait to do it until this next slide. So Ben and I have a close friend of ours that we actually were both helping recently. I helped sell their home, and then also they were preparing to buy a new home. This guy had literally over 20 years of experience in the industry he's in, but because he was moving out of state to take the same type of job, but in a different state, we ran into some of the stuff with the pre-approval where, what we thought wouldn't have even been an issue whatsoever, all of a sudden became one because he didn't have that 2-year of work history, or since it was the same industry, I think it was actually just a couple months of pay stubs with his new job. So anyways, not to go in too much into detail with the specifics there, but making the point that, a lot of times the pre-approval process is also helpful just to do it way in advance, just to identify if there might be any of these things that you're not even thinking about that could come up and maybe prevent you from buying that dream house when the time comes, because you all of a sudden are ready to act, but you can't get that pre-approval because there's this little hiccup, little issue that's going on. So, even if you are maybe 9 months, a year from now as your target for when you want to buy a home, I think it's definitely still worth reaching out to somebody like Ben and doing at least that soft credit pull, get through at least some of the basics with understanding your situation specifically with your lender, and just making sure that when that time comes, you guys are ready to act and you'll be in the best position possible.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you said that, Adam, because buying a home is so emotional, and all of us fall into this trap. We look at the home, the yard, all of the property amenities and the characteristics, and we just, develop a story. We have these dreams of, seeing our family play in the backyard on the swing set, our kids climbing the tree, the family dinners inside of the house. But we also got to, a lot of us put our focus on that. And because of that, we maybe don't give the financing part of it, the mortgage and some of the financial things, as much attention as they deserve. But what I have found is that when you go through and you get pre-approved beforehand, that removes so much stress from a process that is already very emotional. And it allows and creates a much better experience. When you've done this up front, you've got it out of the way, then you know what your options are. You know what your purchasing power is. You know how much you can afford. You've already had these conversations with your mortgage and real estate professionals. So it creates a much better experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to add to that, just as a realtor, I'm at the point where I really, really, really try my best to not even start going out and starting the home showing part of this process, the home search, to not be physically going out and looking at homes until we really do have that pre-approval. Maybe it's not an official letter quite yet, but at least we've gone through the phase of the buyer talking to a lender, really understanding what they can have as their preferred budget to pay for this house. And not, starting off looking at homes that are out of that price range and letting some of these emotional things just kind of, waste our time, where we're out looking at stuff that just really doesn't fit what we're trying to achieve here. So all around, everybody that's involved throughout this entire process all benefits from having this pre-approval done ahead of time. Ben, let's talk now about, we've applied for that mortgage. We've got that pre-approval. There's some very, very, very important things now not to do. Why don't you share these with us?
We've talked about some of the do's. Now let's talk about some of the don'ts. And these are just as important, because this right here is self-sabotage if you make any of these mistakes. And I have these conversations with folks up front, but sometimes they just can't help themselves. So you don't ever want to change bank accounts in the middle of a transaction. Sometimes customers will have multiple accounts. Maybe they'll have one with Chase and Wells Fargo. Another thing that's really frustrating for me on the lending side is that sometimes I'll see individuals are just transferring money just back and forth constantly. Chase, Wells Fargo, this bank, that bank. And it's just like, what are we doing here? That makes the, because keep in mind that the underwriter is going to go through all this, and they see a $5,000 deposit. It says a bank transfer, and they get the other statement. It says it was transferred from another account. So all of those dots need to be connected. Another one that's really important is that all lenders, all banks, all mortgage companies, they have some type of debt monitoring, meaning that they work with the credit bureaus and they have alerts set up to where if you apply for any new debt, any new loans, any new credit cards, or if you take out any new debt, your lender will be notified. So you don't ever want to take out any new debt once you go under contract or once your loan is pre-approved, because that could potentially jeopardize the entire deal. If you do take out new debt, a new auto loan, credit card, that has to be factored in to your monthly obligations and your debt to income ratio. Moving on from there, co-signing. And this is a big one. Don't ever co-sign. So why would someone ask you to co-sign? Well, it's one of two reasons. Number one, they literally do not make enough money to repay the loan. Number two, they have a repeated pattern of behavior of not paying their bills on time. So if someone comes to you and asks to co-sign, it means one of those two things. So when you phrase it like that, would you ever lend or co-sign for someone that literally can't pay the loan back or has a pattern of behavior of not paying their bills on time? The reason that's important is because if you co-sign, that loan is going to go on your credit. And when they stop making payments, it's going to have a huge negative impact on your credit profile and your ability to potentially purchase now or 6 months from now or a year from now. And more than likely, that debt will need to be included in your debt to income ratio. So if a family member comes to you and says, I need you to help co-sign for this truck I want to buy, the payment's going to be $1,000. Not only is that incredibly risky behavior and a risky request, that $1,000 now is going to be included in your debt profile, which could prevent you from getting qualified to go buy your dream home or your first home. From there, you also really don't want to do any big purchases. One of the big purchase questions that comes up for me is people are always excited to start furnishing the home. And they want to, they're very eager. It's like they want to go start buying the furniture before they even own the home. And I'm always like, hold up. I appreciate the excitement. Let's get the home closed first, and then you can go buy your furniture. Another one, and this is another really big one, and folks that are self-employed need to understand how this works. You can't ever just deposit cash into your bank account when you're going through the application process, or if there are any cash deposits, underwriting will review that. More than likely, they will not allow those deposits to be considered eligible for qualifying. And the reason for that is because cash deposits cannot be sourced. So all assets, they have to be sourced adequately, meaning we have to know what the origin or what the source is. If someone has a $5,000 deposit, well, where did that come from? They can say, it came from, it was a gift from a family member, or I had it under my mattress, but there's no way to really verify that. So things that can't be verified aren't going to be eligible.
That's very interesting. So the big one that I really learned after, kind of connecting with Ben about a year ago and talking through specifically some of this stuff when it comes to being in the best position possible to get the highest loan amount and just being, in an opportune scenario for your pre-approval, is just understanding this credit score topic, and specifically just really, really good actionable tips to how to dramatically improve your credit score, and a lot quicker than you guys might think. So this credit repair playbook, I'm going to be sharing this with you guys in an email after the webinar tonight. So definitely go through that, as well as feel free to always reach out to either of us with more specific questions. But the big one that we talked through a lot of different things in this credit repair playbook, but the big one is this credit utilization score and how important it is to keep it under 30%. So I'll let Ben explain a little bit more on this one, since he's a lot more involved in this than I am. But again, guys, in addition to this credit utilization tip that Ben's going to share with you guys now, there's a lot of other really valuable stuff, not only in this credit repair playbook, but also on Ben's YouTube channel. Ben has a YouTube channel. It's called American Money 101. So definitely check that out. I'll have a link for that as well in an email that I'll send out to everybody after tonight's call. So Ben, share a little bit about the credit utilization score.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing the YouTube channel there. Yeah, the reason I always talk about this is because credit utilization has the biggest impact on the consumer's FICO score with the credit bureaus. Now, when I ask individuals, do you have any idea how your credit score is made up or how it's calculated? And everyone always thinks incorrectly, by the way, that the only thing that really matters is, are you making your payments on time? Now, is that important, making your payments on time? Absolutely. You also don't want to have derogatory accounts either, collections, charge-offs, tax liens. But one of the big misconceptions is that people don't understand how revolving credit is graded and how it is supposed to be managed. So revolving accounts are things like credit cards, in-store charge cards. For example, a Costco or a Sam's Club card would be an example of a charge card. Another example would be a home equity line of credit. So they're going to be accounts that have a revolving line of credit. Now, when someone maxes out their credit card, let's say that the credit card limit is $1,000, and let's say that they draw or make $900 worth of purchases. So if the limit is $1,000 and the balance is $900, that would put their credit utilization rate at 90%. What that tells the credit bureaus is that you're maxing out your available line of credit. And that is not how revolving accounts are intended to be used. So you always want to aim to keep your utilization rate under 10%. If you do that, that's going to qualify you for A++ credit management on the utilization rate. But you always want to keep it under 30%. As long as it's under 30%, that's still considered A+ management. It's not the A++, under the 10%. But once you go over that 30%, so, as an example, if your limit is $1,000 and you have a balance of 400, well, at that point, it's going to be 40%. So it's going to start to really adversely impact your score and bring that score down. Not only that, there's two different types of credit utilization. So you have the individual card or account, but then you also have the global credit utilization, which is the combined limits and balances of all of your credit card and revolving accounts combined. So let's say, for example, that you have 3 credit cards and they each have $1,000 limit. So in that case, your global credit utilization, your limit would be 3,000. And let's say that each has a $500 balance. Well, in that case, your global credit utilization would be at 50%. So you want to keep the individual account, your local credit utilization, under 30%, but you also want to keep your global credit utilization under 30% as well. And so that's a reason that for example, I have multiple credit cards. So I have my everyday card, where my everyday purchases go on that. And then I have an entertainment card, where my entertainment kind of specialty items go on that. And then I have a business card as well. So I'm not putting all of my charges on one card. So doing that, it allows me to keep my individual credit utilization rate on each card under the 30%, as well as the global credit utilization in total.
Quick question about this revolving credit lines. So this is not obviously about like student loan debt. This has nothing to do with like a car loan. However, if you guys are currently homeowners right now that are on tonight's webinar, and maybe you have a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, that would be an example still of a revolving credit line, right?
But yeah,
Yep.
it's going to report on credit as a line of credit or a revolving account. So mortgages report is MTG for mortgage. Car loans that you just mentioned and student loans report as installment accounts. But then a home equity line of credit, credit cards, in-store charge cards, all of that falls under revolving. And that's also a reason, kind of to your point there, that's why you always want to have your limit be as high as you can on every type of account. So the bank if they're offering you a credit card of, a limit of 10,000, and let me preface this by saying, as long as you can manage this responsibly, there's a lot of consumers out there that cannot manage their credit cards responsibly. In fact, 79% of Americans can't. That's what the statistics say. 79% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck or have less than a $2,000 emergency fund saved. So if you are going to be tempted, if your credit card limit increases, or if you don't feel like you can manage it because you've never developed those skills or those habits, don't do this. But for the person that does have the financial discipline and pays their credit card off in full each month, you want to have your credit limit be as high as possible on every account. So what I routinely do with all of my credit cards is I will just go in and every quarter or maybe twice a year, just ask for a credit card increase. And usually every time it gets accepted, they'll bump it up 5, 10,000. And 4 or 5 years down the line, I started off at 2 or 3,000 and now it's, exponentially higher than what it was 4 or 5 years ago. But management is the key.
Yeah, I cannot stress that enough because I have been guilty of that myself. You think that you all of a sudden have more money available, but that's credit. That's not money in your account. And you just got to be careful about that. A lot of different things pulling at you, whether it be that vacation that you really want to go on or, whatever it may be. Just being responsible is the big kind of asterisk at the bottom of the specific tip.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
And your future self will thank you when you make those decisions and you make those sacrifices.
Yep. I love that. All right, guys. So now I want to jump into one of my sections. So we talked about this pre-approval process. Now we're in step 2, which is just finding that right home for you. And a few things that I want to share with you just as a realtor, just to give you guys perspective on what it really takes on my end of things to be as successful as possible with providing my clients with the best options when it comes to neighborhoods, homes, features of homes, all that good stuff. So even if you aren't ready to buy a home right now, or maybe not quite ready to move out here to Colorado, it's really good just to talk through this with whoever you might be living in the new home with. And that's understanding what's the most important. What are your priorities? And I like to refer to it as, what are your must-haves? What are your nice-to-haves? And then also, what are any potential deal breakers? So, little context here with those three. A must-have would be something, for example, you've got two young kids. You need to have a minimum of a 3-bedroom house, a bedroom for each of your kids and one for yourself and maybe your partner. That would be a must-have. Another must-have would be you're coming out to Colorado and you know what the weather's like out here. You definitely want to have a 2-car garage. That would be a must-have. Now let's talk about a nice-to-have. A nice-to-have, if you are coming out to Colorado and you haven't been out here yet, you'll quickly find out you have a lot of different hobbies when you move to Colorado: skiing, mountain biking. There's obviously a ton to choose from. What happens though is a lot of that stuff does require equipment, and that equipment takes up a lot of space. Depending on what kind of home you have, you might not have a lot of space to put that within your home. So a lot of that ends up in the garage. So that 2-car garage all of a sudden won't fit 2 cars with your skis and your bikes and all the other stuff, your kayak, who knows what it is. So a nice to have would be an example of, well, we only need a 2-car garage, but man, it sure would be nice to have an extended 2-car garage, or man, it sure would be nice to have a 3-car garage. So that's something that's nice for me to know, because then I can not be completely eliminating homes that don't have a 3-car garage, but I can at least be aware of that and start sharing some of the benefits of homes that maybe have some of these nice to have features. And then a deal breaker would be sort of similar to a must have, but an example of that would be, we have, let's just say that we're looking for a home and we have a requirement that, getting a little bit older in age, we just do not want to be going up and down stairs. So we really only want to have a ranch style home. So a deal breaker would be, it has to be a ranch style and has to have easy access to the front door and also from the garage into the house. So that would be an example of a deal breaker. Another one might be the school district that we're in, and making sure that you're maybe already in Denver living here and you want to keep your kids in the same school district. So a deal breaker would be looking for a home that's, completely somewhere else where they're going to have to change their entire school district. Must-haves, nice-to-haves, deal breakers. Just start thinking through that and write it down. And then that way, when we do connect on a one-on-one, you can share that with me. And that's just something that is really valuable for you guys, but just as much so for me. So the next big one that I want to share with you guys is understanding that there is basically 3 things that, for the most part, determine what people are finding the most important when looking for the neighborhoods and the homes that they are maybe going to put an offer on. Those 3 things are price, location, and condition. And what I like to do is a little exercise with my clients, or really anybody that's, considering moving out here, is just understanding that unless you just won the lottery and you have an endless, pocketbook, you have an endless amount of money, you're really going to want to only be able to have 2 of these 3 as the highest level of importance to you: price, location, and condition. So let's just say that you're coming to me and you have a $500,000 budget and you really want to be in the Golden neighborhood, which is on the western side of Denver, really close actually to where Ben lives. So price and location are really, really important. Well, at $500,000 and Golden, you're probably gonna have to sacrifice that third remaining feature, which is the condition. Condition would just be things like the age of the home, just maybe the condition or the quality of the home. Maybe it's a bit older and outdated versus maybe a brand new built home. So for Golden, you might be, price, location, condition is going to be the one that's going to suffer, or you're going to have to be willing to at least, make a little bit of a concession on that one. We'll do one more example. Let's just say that you really are not that handy. You want a home that's turnkey, meaning that when you buy the home, you open the front door, everything is clean, new, nothing that needs to get fixed, new equipment, new mechanical systems, new appliances, just everything is pretty much brand new. That would be condition. Well, let's say that that's really important to you, and you also are really important to be a location. Let's use Littleton, where I live down south. So if that's the case, well, you probably have to pay a little bit more. A new built home in the Littleton area, it has that good location and has that good condition. That price point down here might be $750,000 or maybe even $800,000. So just understanding that if you look at these three things, that'll really help you understand which ones are the most important.
Yeah.
Hey, Ben, before I continue, I'm starting to feel a little bit of a echo. Do you hear that?
I don't. No, I'm not hearing the echo.
Okay, maybe it's just on mine. All right, let's move on to the next slide. So another really helpful thing that I want to share with you guys. So I'll put the link in the email I'm going to share with you after this. But on my website, adamsellsdenver.com, I've got this interactive map. I've got over 20 neighborhoods all around Denver. You can see it on that little laptop image next to my dog, Charlie. And on all of these 20 neighborhoods, you can go on the website and click each of these individually. It'll share with you a ton of valuable info about the schools, neighborhood info, what best restaurants are in those areas. Just a really good, thorough way to maybe explore a little bit if you aren't yet that familiar with Denver. So wanted to share that with you specifically, but also some other free resources on the Adam Sells Denver website. You can find a lot of free resources such as neighborhood guides, links to my YouTube channel where I mentioned earlier, I have over 125 videos. And then also this really great locals guide to Denver, which coincidentally also has 20 neighborhoods, but not the same as what you're seeing on the map here, but 20 that I've personally picked as some of my favorites. And on each of these, I share my favorite bars, restaurants, parks, trails, what farmers markets exist in those areas, just all the stuff that maybe is a little bit harder to find out about if you're not a Denver native like both Ben and myself are. So all that stuff we'll be sharing with you after tonight's call. So definitely dig into that. And if you have questions afterwards, feel free to reach out. Ben, before we move on, anything you want to share on step 2?
I don't, but step 3 right here, very, very important. I would say this is my kind of my favorite part of the process, and very excited to hear and what you have to share for all of us. Very, very important.
Yep. Well, how about I'll start and then I'll let Ben, before I move on to the next slide after this one, I'll let you chime in if you have anything to add. So guys, when you're looking to buy a home, you've done your pre-approval process, you've gone out with a realtor like myself, you've explored neighborhoods, you've identified maybe a few homes that really fit everything you're looking for on those must-haves, those nice-to-haves, all that good stuff. Now we've identified a couple homes. There's one that we've really narrowed down and realized this is the best one. We really want to win this home. We want to, when I say win it, what I'm referring to is putting an offer out there that is going to win over any other offers, as well as win in a sense of being attractive enough to get the sellers to agree and go under contract with us. So we're ready to submit an offer. When doing so, there's 3 things that can happen. Most likely it's going to be number 3, but I'll go through all 3 of these. So number 1 is accepting the offer as written. This is going to be the case if you're in a very competitive market where every single home, like it was a few years ago, Ben had mentioned how he went to an open house and there was 50 to 75 people waiting to go into that house. You can imagine that any offers that seller received, which I'm sure probably was at least 10 or more, who knows how many, people realized that in order to get their offer accepted, they needed to have it be at asking price, if not maybe even above asking price, and as attractive as possible. So in a very rare scenario like that, there's a good chance the offer could be accepted as written. But more likely it's going to happen is they're going to get the offer and there's going to be a few things that maybe they want to adjust. And in which case that third option, counter offer, is what will happen. Before jumping a little bit more in depth on the counter offer though, number 2 is probably the least common of these 3, and really is only going to happen if you have an agent that writes an offer that is either very, very poorly written or is just at a price point or just has certain terms in the offer that are just unacceptable and not even at a meeting point where the seller is willing to even write out a counter offer. So, hopefully you guys aren't getting any offers completely declined. If you are, I would just, on a side note, maybe kind of take a note on who you're working with as your agent, as a real estate agent, and, maybe have a second guess about if that's the right person for you. But again, talking about the third option, counter offer, this is what almost all offers these days get to. And what happens in a counter offer, like I said, is we'll put an offer together, we'll write it out as great as possible, great terms, all the dates and deadlines for the different parts of the contract will be, written very favorably. But, maybe there's just one thing that needs to get adjusted. I wrote an offer this past week for one of my clients and everything was very, very well written. We did a great job with the entire offer. And we ended up though still having a counter offer. And that was because of the closing date. I had the closing date as I think it was May 28th, and they had, reached out and in their counter explained to us that, they have a child who's graduating high school and they really want to stay in the home until after that. So they sent us a counter offer and just had the difference of the closing date from May 28th to June 15th, something like that. So anyways, just because it's a counteroffer doesn't necessarily mean that it's something to be worried about. It could be something very small like that. Oftentimes it's also even just kind of clerical type stuff for compliance with the real estate companies, the brokerages, just to make sure that it's in alignment with what they require as a brokerage. So those are the three different scenarios. One little kind of pro tip that I'll share before having Ben chime in is not focusing only on the price. So this is the biggest thing that I think so many agents never even discuss with their clients. And I think most people just in general don't really have a good grasp of. And what I'm referring to is motivation. So one of the best things a real estate agent that's working with a buyer can do is be very proactive and reach out to the selling agent before submitting an offer, just to do a little bit of due diligence, do a little bit of investigation to find out if the seller is willing to share, what the motivation is behind them selling the home, as well as maybe what's really important to them. So a couple examples of this. The first one, there's a lot of negative things that cause people to sell their homes. It's not always a positive experience for people. Divorce is well over 50% these days. So that's a great example. When a divorce is happening, kind of this is one of these things that they just want to get over with. So they might not be as critical on the specific price as maybe they really just want to have the closing date be as soon as possible so they can, kind of go their separate ways and be done. That would be an example of finding out this kind of stuff ahead of time and then working that into the contract to really reflect that this is not only a great offer for yourself, the buyer, but also it's really a great offer and a great win-win for everybody for the selling side as well. One other example of this before letting Ben chime in is a post-closing occupancy agreement. So I've done quite a few of these. And what this is it's, again, understanding the seller's motivation. An example would be like the people I had just mentioned about how they want to sell their house. We wrote an offer. The only thing they countered back on was the closing date. Let's just say that they really, though, still want to close as soon as possible. The sellers do, because they need that money. They want to go buy a new home. Maybe they are planning on downsizing now that their son or daughter is graduating high school. So now they're ready to sell their home, downsize into a smaller home. Well, they need that money to make an offer that's strong on a new home. So what we could do is, instead of just extending out that closing date, we could still have the closing date be very soon. For example, let's say May 28th. So in 2 weeks, or it would be a little bit longer than that, but 3 weeks, let's say. But we could implement a post-closing occupancy agreement. You can have these for up to 60 days. And what it is it basically still lets you buy the home on that earlier date. But then once that date happens, the existing homeowner stays there for a period of time. It could either be for free, so free rent basically, or you could put a dollar amount per day, and you can do this for up to 60 days. And this is just another way to have something creative in the contract to allow them to take some of that pressure off and be able to get the money from selling the home and be starting to put offers out to buy their next home, and kind of, again, have it be a win-win situation. So there's a lot of other strategies like this, but this is just one that's very common, and I think one that has a ton of value if it's for the right type of seller that needs something like this. A lot of people, they don't need this, so it's only effective if you've done your due diligence and found out this is important to them.
Yeah, and to me, this step right here, crafting a winning offer, is what separates the best agents from the rest of the agents. And I always, there's a little bit of a misconception out there, in my opinion, and it's a little bit more common with first-time home buyers, and where they have some of these beliefs where, in order for me to win as a buyer, the seller has to lose. And so it's almost like they're trying to strong arm the seller into getting like the very best deal, and kind of take advantage of the seller, or put the seller in a worse position and elevate them into a better position. And let me tell you right now, the best offers are when the offers are written as a win-win for the seller and for the buyer. And what you just mentioned, and this is why I just have so much respect for you, Adam, as a buyer's agent, because you're one of the few agents that is willing to pick up the phone and have those conversations with the listing agent and sellers and ask some of those questions. What is your seller's motivation? What are they looking to accomplish? Why are they looking to sell? And you're not trying to, get personal and pry, and, you're asking those questions. So when you submit that offer, it's going to be as seller friendly as possible. So if the seller says, we're looking to close on May 31st because we're moving out of state, we're already under contract in this other home, well, you're going to write the offer with a closing date of May 31st. And if they say that, we really want the earnest money to be 10,000, you're going to write the offer with 10,000. They might say that we're looking to get this much back for our loan proceeds, and we need the price to be this much. You're going to consider putting it together in that way. But now you also are representing your buyer, and your buyer has their goals too. Maybe your buyer doesn't want to pay for the closing costs. And so to make that happen, maybe we bump the sales price up $10,000. So the seller still gets that number that they need, but then they're giving a credit back to the buyer. So the buyer doesn't have to pay for any closing costs out of pocket. And so that's kind of what I'm talking about, where you really can, if the offer is written the right way, the buyer and the seller can win. And if everyone's goals can get accomplished, that is how you craft a winning offer.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's just say we've written the best offer ever, got accepted, not even a counter offer, just got accepted as is. We're under contract. There's a lot of different dates and deadlines that happen once we're under contract. I like to refer to this as the contract to close phase. But the biggest one, in my opinion, outside of what Ben's obviously more involved with the lending side and the loan approval and all that good stuff regarding your mortgage. But for me, as a realtor, it's really being in depth and just very engaged with the inspection, the appraisal as well. But really, I want to just hit home on the inspection. So an inspection is just basically a home inspection, a guy that comes out, or a gal comes out and just checks the entire property's condition, ensures that you're aware of anything that might be going on, maybe repairs that are needed, maybe anything that's health and safety related. I have a great guy that I work with. His name is John with Iron Horse Inspection. And what he does is at the end of the inspection, he puts together this very in-depth report, and it's kind of like a stoplight. It's got green, yellow, and red. If it's green, good to go. If it's yellow, might be things that should maybe be looked at in the future. It's not anything critical, but it's still worth noting. Anything red is usually health and safety related, or just things that are to the point where he thinks it's very serious, or at least worth considering putting a little bit of a pushback when it comes to the inspection objection. So within inspection, you have what's known as inspection objection, and then also inspection resolution. Inspection objection is, as a buyer, after the inspection is done, requesting potentially some additional money to be taken off at the closing for some expenses that might be coming up for whether it be maybe it's some windows that need to get repaired, or maybe the mechanical systems are very aged and old, stuff like that. It could either be something where the seller fixes those things on their own dime prior to the closing, or a lot of times it'll just be a dollar amount known as a seller credit, which will be applied at the closing table, reducing the dollar amount that you have to bring to the closing table to pay for that new home. The thing I wanted to talk about, though, is specific to Colorado. So if you guys are maybe out in a different state, like I noticed somebody here from California, it looks like another person actually joined that maybe is from Texas. Anybody that's from out of state, we have two things here. One of them is what's known as radon. Radon is this, it's a gas under the ground that is odorless, but can be harmful if at a very high level. It oftentimes gets trapped in a subfloor, meaning the area between your floor and your lowest level of your home and the ground. So if you have like a crawl space, as an example, a lot of times those areas are more prone to have higher levels of radon. So it's always good to have a radon test done for the home inspection. And then the second one is a sewer scope. So with Colorado, we have a lot of different types of soil and clay, as well as a lot of trees that have a mind of their own, and all the roots like to kind of go this way and that. And oftentimes over 20, 30 years later, have restricted some of the sewer lines to the point of creating a little bit of a belly, which means the pipe no longer has the perfect downward grade. It might have a belly, which is a little bit of a flat spot. We can collect water there. And if it gets really bad, could even get to the point where it starts backing up into your house. So these are things that are just oftentimes not done, but are very, very important and not that expensive. Radon is, I think, $95 these days for the test, and Sewer Scope is $150. So for $250, very, very important, not only just to have that peace of mind, but this is a great example from a negotiation standpoint. By doing these things and identifying potential places where you could push back during that inspection objection, and hopefully get a few extra dollars in your pocket, as you know, just taking a little bit of money off the dollar amount. So important to just take that into consideration. And then the last thing is understanding that home inspections aren't only for older homes. A lot of new builds, so new construction communities, often will try and kind of waive the home inspection, meaning that they'll say, you know, you don't need it. It's brand new. You know, the guy's just finished building the home. You know, you don't need to check for old stuff because it's brand new. Well, you'd be surprised how oftentimes new construction has a lot of stuff that comes up regarding that sewer scope. You know, we found a home recently where in the sewer scope, they found all kinds of construction debris and things that would have, if not have been identified, could have significantly backed up and caused all kinds of headaches for the homeowner after they moved in. If you are still pushing back on the home inspection for new construction, the one other suggestion I have, only if you really are pushing back, is oftentimes a new construction home will give you a 1-year home warranty. The builder will provide you with that. What you can do is have the home inspection instead of before buying the home, schedule it for about month 10 after you've moved in. That way you have enough time to do an inspection then and really get critical. You know, this door doesn't quite close like it should in the kitchen or whatever it may be. And by doing that, you can then take that to the builder before that 1-year warranty is up and hopefully get all of that stuff addressed at no cost of yours. So worth looking at that as well. I won't talk too much about appraisal, but basically appraisal is just something that is required if you guys are getting a loan. So if you're getting a mortgage through somebody like Ben, this is going to be a requirement. If you aren't doing a loan, if this is a cash offer, you can still do the appraisal, but oftentimes in this scenario, people will waive the appraisal to make it an even more attractive offer and, you know, hopefully be even more of a win-win, at least it would be even more of a desirable offer for the sellers to accept. Sorry, I kind of just went a little bit on a detour there, but Ben, you have anything to add on that one?
You know, the only thing that I wanted to add there is, you know, the reason it's so important to get the appraisal is because the appraisal, it really does protect both parties. It protects the buyer and it also protects the lender. And the reason for that, the reason that you want an appraisal is you really want an independent third party, an opinion from an independent third party or an appraiser that the agreement that you have with the seller, that the home is really worth what you have agreed to pay for it. So if you are getting financing, a bank is going to order the appraisal to protect their interests, to make sure that they're lending on something that is, you know, has adequate collateral. But then you as the buyer, they're also protecting your interest because, you know, they're hiring this professional at your expense just to make sure that the home is worth as much as the agreed upon contract. So very important.
Mm-hmm. I already talked through a lot of this stuff, but again, just how important negotiation is just as a fundamental part of this contract. So just make sure you guys are just really having that as top of mind when you are under contract and hopefully working with somebody that has a good understanding of this, like myself. If you have more specific questions on the negotiation tactics and just that strategy, feel free to reach out. Just to be respectful of your time, I'm going to move on from this slide, but just a very, very important part of finding a good quality realtor. All right, so we made it to the fifth and final step, closing and final walkthrough. So final walkthrough, that's something that's usually done the morning of the closing. So after you've gotten through everything else in this contract to close timeline, the very last thing is closing. And that's when you're going to typically go to the title office and sign a bunch of paperwork and make that home purchase official. What you want to do, though, is you always want to do a final walkthrough. And what happens here is usually it's no longer than maybe 15 to 20 minutes. If you guys are out of state, like I know a few of you are on the call tonight, I'm always really good at doing this myself, even if you're not able to be out here in person for the closing. And what I'll do is I'll just go out to the home and just make sure, just do a quick walkthrough that nothing is out of the norm. Couple things that have happened, unfortunately, more often than we'd like to see. One of them being sometimes sellers, in the offer, it's very specific on what's known as an inclusion and what's an exclusion. An inclusion is anything that's going to be left with the house. So let's just use a washer and dryer as an example. If the sellers have agreed to include as an inclusion the washer and dryer, that means that that's part of the $500,000, whatever the dollar amount is that you're paying for that home. During that final walkthrough, I might go through and, oh my gosh, where's the washer and dryer? Oh, maybe the sellers forgot, or maybe they are trying to pull a fast one on us, or whatever it may be. Maybe they have a daughter that said she needs a new washer and dryer. So they said, you know what, we'll just give it to you instead. Well, that's not acceptable. So by doing a final walkthrough, you're able to identify if there is anything out of the norm. And if so, basically catch this before going to the title office and making it official. You can hopefully still kind of iron out some of these last minute items if needed and still make the closing happen that day. But that would be one example. A more extreme example, especially this time of year right now in the springtime in Colorado, Mother's Day was last weekend. So that's usually a kind of a benchmark of the season for when a lot of people turn on their sprinkler lines. So their irrigation for their outside of their home. What oftentimes can happen is somebody's selling a home. They've already moved on to their new home. So the current home that they're selling is vacant. And maybe they had somebody go over to their home and turn the sprinklers on for the season for them. They want to make sure the grass is looking nice and green for the new homeowners. Well, maybe that person's not familiar with the home and forgot to tighten up a little bolt or a nut, or, just did something that wasn't supposed to be done, thought everything was good to go, and they left. Well, now you go for the final walkthrough, you go downstairs and there's 6 inches of water in the basement because something wasn't done right, or maybe a pipe broke or something. Another great example, though, of how important these final walkthroughs are. Even if they don't seem like it's really necessary, I'm just really want to hit home that this is something you definitely want to do on every single home you purchase. So just be very aware of that. And if you aren't available, you aren't in Colorado, I'm always happy to do these for you. So just be aware of that too. And then closing day, Ben, why don't you just kind of share on that one, since you're oftentimes, I know Ben does great where he's, a lot of times for closing day, the lender won't attend that. A lot of lenders will just kind of consider it a done deal at that point. But Ben always, I know if he's able to, will always go above and beyond and go attend those just to be part of the celebration at the title office. And Ben, just share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah, the closing day is such an exciting day, and I love to be there when I can, because I want to, number one, just thank the customers that I'm working with, but I want to be there to be part of their excitement. I remember the first home that I bought in Phoenix, Arizona, and there are so many things that I remember about the day. I remember going to the Wells Fargo that was in a Fry's grocery store and getting my certified funds cashier's check that I needed to come into closing with. And I remember the teller's name that helped me. And I remember the drive over. And it really is, if you're buying your first home, it really is one of the most meaningful and important days of your life. And if you do things right, and if you manage that asset that you have, like, your life will be forever changed. Now, on the day of closing, there's going to be some documents that you're going to sign. There's going to be some title documents. There's going to be some real estate documents, and there's also going to be some lending documents as well. Now, pre-COVID, it was not uncommon to have all parties in the closing room at the same time. You'd have the buyer, the buyer's agent, the seller, the seller's agent, the title company, the notary, the lender, if they were there. Really, that's changed, though, a little bit after 2020. Now it's much more common for the closing to be broken up into two sections: the buy section and then the sale section. So if you're a buyer, you're going to be signing the settlement statement, which is the real estate version of the title documents that kind of breaks down all the numbers. The lending version of that is called the closing disclosure. And then you're going to have all of the loan documents, which is going to make up a majority of the documents that you'll sign. So there's also going to be a witness to your signature, and that's what the notary does. Usually it takes about 30 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes. But again, at that point, there shouldn't be any surprises. You should know how much you have to bring into closing. You should know your loan terms, your monthly payments, everything else should be finalized, your homeowner's insurance, and you really want to focus on making that an exciting day. So,
yeah, when it comes to, taking some of the anxiety and the stress out of this, one great thing is, if you are doing a mortgage, if you have a loan attached to this purchase, is usually about 5 days before the closing, we'll have what's called clear to close. And that's always kind of that final deadline in the bunch of the different deadlines in the contract. And that's where Ben and the lending is able to say, yes, they're clear to close, meaning that they're good to go. And that way you're not, showing up literally to the closing table and am I going to be able to buy this still or not? I'm just really glad that they've implemented that just to take some of that stress and anxiety off of the actual day of closing. And then the other thing I'll share for, again, some of the people that are on that are from out of state, you don't have to be out here in Denver to do this. Nowadays, since COVID and all the remote virtual stuff, kind of like what we're doing right now on a Zoom, is you're able to even remotely you're able to do a remote closing where you'll have a notary also join the webinar or join the Zoom call and just have you provide some, proof of who you are through the Zoom call and still be able to do it, remotely. So that's always an option if that's something that you guys need. So 3 big mistakes that home buyers make. We've talked through a lot of this already tonight, but just to kind of wrap this up and just as a couple 3 reminders that I think are 3 of the biggest things specifically for buyers to keep in mind. First and foremost is overlooking hidden costs. So really just understanding, Ben was talking about this pre-approval process, understanding that owning a home isn't just about that mortgage. You also have other expenses you have to take into consideration: property taxes, insurance, any maintenance on the property. And if you are in a master plan community, you might have HOA fees, or it might be in a metro tax district. So just to understand taxes just really quickly, in Colorado, it can vary significantly on the area that you're in. So in a place like maybe where I'm at here in Littleton, our property tax rate is at about 0.4, so just under 0.5%. So if it's a $500,000 home at a 0.5% annual property tax rate, that's a $2,500 a year annual payment you're making on your taxes. If you're buying a home in a new community, like a new build master plan community, there's an area near me actually in southwestern Littleton called Sterling Ranch. Out there, it's at 1.4%. So it's literally a full percentage point higher. So in that scenario, a $500,000 house is about $7,500 a month. So just understanding there's other costs other than just the price of the home. And you're going to have to factor all of that in when you're doing this pre-approval and just understanding with your lender what that monthly final amount is going to be to ensure that you're going to be able to pay that and not get into a pickle. And then number 2, neglecting home inspections. We talked through this already. You guys know I'm passionate about this one, but just don't skip these. It's well worth it. You're going to be happy you did. Just really, really important. And then number 3, just Ben was really hitting this one, emotional decision-making. Just understanding that this home that you're trying to purchase is probably going to be the biggest financial decision, the biggest purchase you're ever going to make in your entire life. Don't let emotions overrule some practical considerations about the home, whether it be size, location, price, but also just letting your emotions get the best of you where maybe you're not thinking clearly. And during that inspection, as an example, maybe there's some big kind of red flag that the inspector identifies, and it could be a $20,000 or $30,000 problem down the road, but you're so emotionally attached to the home that you just kind of have your blinders on. You're not even really worrying about that. That could come back and bite you in the butt. So just being as practical and just grounded as you can be during this part of the process. All right. So a couple tips for you guys. Again, stay flexible, be open to different types of homes, different neighborhoods. Definitely consider new construction if you are really focused on the interest rates. However, Ben we could do a whole separate webinar just on this. At the end of the day, you have to look at a lot more than just the interest rate. There's a lot of other factors that go into that. So new construction, as an example, yes, they might be offering a really good incentive, like maybe it's only 4% interest rate instead of what we're seeing right now, closer to 7%. Well, they're making up for that somehow. It might be that they're charging a little bit more for the home than maybe what they really should. There's a lot of different things to take into factor here. And then just planning again for these closing costs, not only those things that I mentioned already, like that Ben actually mentioned earlier, but also understanding that different types of homes can have some things that might not be included. New construction homes oftentimes do not include a few things that people get kind of surprised about. And those would just be things like the washer and dryer, a refrigerator, believe it or not. Sometimes new construction homes don't include a refrigerator. It's not part of habitability to get a certificate of occupancy because they have a heating source that's sufficient. Also, a lot of times the rear of the home in new build communities will not include any sort of landscaping or grass. It'll just have the irrigation lines, and that's it. Depending on what you're putting in the backyard, that could be $15,000, $20,000. And then the biggest one, though, is usually the window coverings. So you go into a beautiful model home in a new build community, everything's, to the nines, everything looks awesome. Get the home that you're actually buying, and all of a sudden it's just like you're in a fishbowl. There's no window coverings, no blinds, no drapes, nothing. So just be aware that that could also be a pretty significant cost depending on what you're putting in. So next steps to move forward, the biggest one is just talking to somebody like Ben. Before you guys really engage with somebody like myself, it's really important to start off with that pre-approval, not necessarily going through the entire process if it's a further out goal of yours, but at least connecting with somebody like Ben just to understand, what maybe you need to do today to be in that position when that time comes. Then after you've done that, work with somebody like myself, help you navigate the home search. Even if you're not ready to move for another year, I could at least put you on a couple different types of home automated property search alerts. This is a great way for us to start kind of sifting through what you like, what you don't like, and hopefully you have a little bit more of a clear direction for what we're looking for when that time comes. And definitely education, just education. The more informed you are, the better decisions you're going to make. So utilize some of these additional resources that I'll share with you after the call tonight. And then last but not least, stay informed, be patient. Don't rush into any decisions. Don't be emotional. So these are all the things that we'll be sharing with you guys after tonight's call, as well as Ben's contact info. And biggest thing too is just scheduling a one-on-one. So you can download all this stuff by this QR code. But again, this one-on-one call is just a great, no pressure here. I just want to connect with you guys. Ben would love the opportunity to do the same. So this one here is written for me specifically, but Ben will obviously always be able to do the same with you as well. All right, guys. I know we kind of went through that quickly. It was about an hour and 15 minutes. So we got another 15 minutes or so. If you guys have any questions, we'll open it up.
I see a couple of questions in the chat here.
Yeah. Do you see one?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
We have a question from Esteban for Adam. So this is for you, Adam. One of my buddies told me that homeowners insurance have a higher, one of my buddies told me that homeowners have a higher net worth than renters. Is that true? And what does he mean by net worth?
Yeah, I'll share a little bit on that, and then I'll let you maybe. I know you have some good. I know we've talked about this one a lot. I think most recently, a couple months ago, I read a stat where I think renters had a net worth of I think it's like $2,000, and the average net worth. And net worth is basically just after all of your bills are paid. Let's say you have $100,000 in savings, and you have different types of debts, maybe a car, maybe student loans, a bunch of stuff that maybe adds up to $50,000 of total debt. So your net worth would be the difference, about $50,000. So a homeowner is, I think, over $300,000 now of net worth. A renter is only about $2,000. So just a massive, massive difference. And I think, we're obviously biased a little bit since we're both in this industry, but I've just never seen anywhere else that can perform consistently and I think somewhat reliable, a very reliable way to build your significant amount of your net worth and your wealth.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it is true. Homeowners have a much higher net worth than renters. And when you take that step and you become a homeowner, you really at that point want to be a homeowner for the rest of your life. And homeownership has changed my life. There are so many benefits. It stabilizes your housing expense, it stabilizes your home, your family situation. And then, you get access to all of those equity gains over time. And when you're making that payment every month, you're paying that loan balance down, but then you're going to work every day, earn an income. Your home is also going to work. That value is going to be going up over time. So I believe it absolutely, and I've seen it firsthand. We have another question for Adam from Julieta. How much can I expect the earnest money to be?
All right. Hey, Juliet. So earnest money can vary big time. So it really is totally up to the seller. So when a home is preparing, when a listing agent, a realtor, is helping a person sell their home, they'll go through what's known as an exclusive right to sell contract with that person. And in that contract, they'll identify what they want to sell the home for, but also a few other things, such as how much earnest money they're going to ask for. So earnest money is, again, kind of skin in the game. It's a way for a buyer to put some money, and it most of the time can be saved if you decide you don't want that house. 9 times out of 10, you're able to still get that money back. But it's usually at least enough of a dollar amount to make sure that whoever is going under contract as a buyer, that they're serious. So it's just a way to show your level of intent and your level of seriousness that you want to buy the home. I've seen it everywhere, anywhere from, I think the lowest one I've ever done was maybe $5,000. I kind of specialize usually in like 750 to $1.5 million range homes. That's kind of been my bread and butter, at least recently. So for that level of home, usually it's anywhere between $10,000 and $20,000. But there's some, earnest monies that are as little as $500. So it really just depends. And that's just something else, though, that can be negotiated, in the offer. So if they're asking for a $15,000 earnest money, but maybe you only want to offer 10, I've never done that where I've offered less than that, but the opposite of that, if you really wanted your offer to stand out even more, you could always offer a little bit more than what the earnest money request is. What about you,
Adam? Have another question from Edgar for Adam. Looks like he's asking about seasonality. Does it matter what time of year I should buy? How big of a deal is that? That's from Edgar.
I think no matter what, any time of the year, if you're a buyer and you have something that is really important to you as far as timing goes, like maybe you want to buy a home before the fall semester for your kids to be able to enroll in school for the fall, whatever it may be, I think I'm pretty confident that we'll be able to find a good home for you regardless of what time of year it is. But when it comes to negotiation and having a little bit more of an advantage, a little bit more leverage as a buyer, I think in that scenario, it's always good to be trying to buy a home when it's more of a buyer's market, meaning that there's a lot of inventory and maybe not as many buyers, meaning that you have a little bit more of an advantage. So right now, for example, there's a lot of homes that are on the market and they're not selling as quickly. So if you are a buyer, this could be a great time. But also it could be a great time, for example, like in November, December, where a lot of people are trying to sell their homes. Maybe they just haven't been able to sell it yet. They want to at least give it until the end of the year. And that could be an opportunity as a buyer where maybe you can come in and get a little bit lower price accepted on your offer because you're, maybe the only offer that they're getting because it's at the end of the year. I'd like to just get your feedback on that one, Ben. Do you have anything else to add for Julietta?
Yeah, what I would add is I think there's opportunities that are in every market, and I think as a buyer you want to identify those opportunities, and that's where I believe sometimes you'll hear people say I'm waiting for the market to correct, or I'm waiting for interest rates to come down, and that's the mistake is waiting. It's not trying to time the market. This is what Warren Buffett says. He says that timing the market is a mistake. It's not timing the market, it's time in the market. And so if your vision and your plan for yourself, if you envision yourself being a homeowner the next 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you really want to take action today. If it's part of your long-term plan for wealth building, there's no reason to, you want to, do you want to be diligent? Do you want to find the right property? Absolutely. But you want to have that mindset where I am going to act, pull the trigger, and I'm going to prepare as if I'm purchasing something right now.
It looks like I can see it.
We got two more questions here. This one is from Robert for Adam. Do you work with investors, and do you think now is a good time to look at investments in Denver?
Yeah. So, sorry, I didn't see who was that. What was his name? I don't.
That's from Robert.
Hey, Robert. So this one, we can go a lot of different directions on this one. I would say, though, a great thing to start with is just connecting again with Ben's YouTube channel, American Money 101, and also even on our podcast, the Pursuit of Progress podcast. We talk about this in a lot of our episodes, just about real estate investing. Ben is really big on this with vacation rentals in a few different states, Also just some long-term rentals here in the Denver market. I think though, with investment properties, the biggest thing is understanding that there's different opportunities to make money other than just waiting for the home to appreciate. You can get a renter in there and obviously help them pay for that mortgage on your rental property. You have opportunities to, have value add where maybe you're looking at a home that's a single family home, but has an opportunity to kind of break off part of the home and create a second, area in the home to rent out. Denver actually just passed some stuff at the end of last year where now they're allowing ADUs, which are accessory dwelling units in the city of Denver, which was very restrictive in the past, just to help improve, I think, the amount of people that can live here. And there's an issue right now, which is with housing. So they were loosening up these restrictions at the end of last year, where now if you have a big enough lot size, you can even build one of these in your backyard and rent it out, short term, long term, depending on what is allowed in that area. And maybe you can have it as like a mother-in-law unit. So there's a lot of stuff like that that can be creatively done regardless of what time of year or what market we're in. So if you're creative, I think now could be a great opportunity. I would say though, if you're trying to build something, it might be a little bit more expensive right now, just with tariffs and some of that stuff going on. But overall, I think with investment properties, it's just a thing again about just getting educated and understanding, because there's a little bit more factors that are going on, cap rates, different things that you just need to have a little bit more of an understanding of to make a good decision if you are looking at rental properties. But yeah, we have a lot of great stuff we can share on that more one-on-one if you wanted to set up a call just with Ben and myself.
I think that's a great answer, and I would agree. I think the education piece, the planning, the vision, really having a strong grasp of that is so important. All right, I'm glad that you brought up the one-on-one, because this is our last question of the night from Miguel. This is for Adam as well. Wants to know how much are the strategy calls to do the one-on-one? How much do the strategy calls cost?
So I used to charge $997, but for you, Miguel, free. I'm kind of joking there. I would love the opportunity to connect with any of you guys on a one-on-one, and I just use this as an opportunity just to dig a little deeper onto your specifics, hopefully find some ways that I can give you guys additional value that's relevant to what you're specifically trying to do. So it's not a sales pitch. It's just really just a call, kind of like Ben and I are doing right now, where we just can kind of get to know each other a little bit and start finding what's most important to you. And I can start helping lead you down that path, whatever it may be. So definitely no strings attached there. The link will be in the email that's getting sent out right after the call tonight, or just go to my website, adamsillsdenver.com. You can schedule a one-on-one there. Ben, before we close it out, why don't you just give everybody your phone number and your info, just in case they want to write it down before I send it to them.
Yeah, I would love to connect. If you want to reach out to me, you can reach me directly, phone call or text message. My direct number is 602-904-2443. My email address is benjamin.adams, that's benjamin.adams @northpointe.com. Northpointe is spelled NORTHPOINTE.com.
And definitely check out his YouTube channel. Again, that's American Money 101. And after tonight's webinar, Ben and I are actually getting ready to record our newest episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast. So you guys will definitely want to kind of get dialed in and check some of those episodes out too. We've got both video versions available on YouTube, as well as the audio available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, just all the major podcast platforms.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for attending tonight. Really appreciate your time. I know this was a lot of info, but we really appreciate you sticking around until the end. And we'll be doing these every few weeks. So if you guys want to hop on the next one, you're always invited. And I just hope that we get the opportunity to connect on a one-on-one here soon and learn a little bit more about how both of us can help you guys. Thanks, Ben.
All right. Well, thank you again for having me on. Thank you for all of our attendees, and we will see you guys in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, guys.